So
I really am. I've got my not air conditioning. I'm about to. I'm looking up the official topic of the panel: books that spoil themselves. And I guess one of the things, we're going to start with the usual, everybody introducing themselves. But before I do that, yeah, really. What was that? I heard that. It's the usual WBAI deficiency, which is a oxymoron. Okay, fine. Hello, welcome everybody. Little did she know that that was the last time she would see him alive. And similar lines in books go beyond foreshadowing into the realm of spoilers. The movie Stranger Than Fiction explores the use of the phrase, little did he know, and Joe Hill's The Fireman, among many other books, include several examples. Why and how do authors use this often derided literary advice, and how does it affect the reader's experience of the story? Now, is there anybody who wants to actually discuss that, or should we do our own thing? Okay. We will begin by introducing ourselves, and then we'll actually address this question. I have some questions for the panel as well. And I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Jim Freund. I host a radio program in New York since, God help me, 1972 called Hour of the Wolf, which is about science fiction and fantasy. And after 40 years of stuff, the first of many audiobooks collected from that. Out for a whole week. So that's ego. I don't even know if we can earn a penny from it. And I have flyers for the show. So, Max Gladstone.
Hi, I'm Max Gladstone. Like Jim just said. Hi, everybody. I write fantasy novels and science fiction. The craft sequence of books are sort of necromantic legal thrillers set in a kind of post-industrial fantasy land where you have wizards running around in pinstripe suits performing necromantic bankruptcy transactions on the corpses of gods. So, just one of those. And I write some SF2, and I'm very happy to be here, especially as a student at John's in school. I was really chuffed to be on the panel.
I got everything.
Yeah.
I'm John Crowley. I taught Max Gladstone at Yale, and I've written some books. They are full of, at least I think they are, well thought out literary devices of the kind. I think that it's interesting to talk about it. That's the kind of thing we like to talk about.
Is this working? Okay. So I'm Yves. I write science fiction and fantasy in French and in English, in order that I will be invited to talk to my hat.
I'm Laura Roy. I write urban fantasy. I have a series about empire bookseller or smart-ass crew of booksellers and house runners, because I have no shame. I used to be a bookseller. And I've done freelance writing for tabletop novels.
Oh, because I always want to talk about something, I always forget to mention when I introduce myself. I'm also the host of Lightspeed Magazine's podcast, the audio editor of that, so I thought I'd throw that in. So now, so the actual question that they ask are about why and how do authors use this often derided literary device. I don't think think it's a derided literary device. I think, you know, plenty of really wonderful, fun writers have used it. How do you all feel
Well, it's
about that?
Dickens, you know, for one. It's not a much derided writer. I can't quote when he said, little did we know, but I guarantee you he did at least once, if not many times. It used to be a very common literary device. It's less common now, but it's not uncommon now. It's just put into different terms. It's not, it may not use the words little did he, she know, but it's the same device. It's what actually, in terms of classical rhetoric, is called prolepsis. You state something that is going to happen in the future. You jump forward. Prolepsis means jump forward. And there are many, many works that use the device of prolepsis for sure. So I think that's one of the things we've got to make clear that little did he know is a sort of crude or a low-level version of a highly flexible rhetorical device.
I get the impression that it's easy to do prolepsis, think of the word, badly,
Okay.
so that this is where it gets its bad reputation from.
That's probably what we're doing.
I think that this device is sort of inherent and inseparable from the use of a storytelling voice that requires the existence of a text. And I mean that as a spoken, in a very loose sense of text, a spoken text, a written text, or like a video or something. Because when the text exists, there's a sort of implied fact that someone is creating it, or has created it. Moby Dick is presented as Ishmael's narrative. Ishmael is intentionally writing it down and relating it to a reader, which means that Ishmael survives the events that are included, no matter how weird things get. And Ishmael is frequently introducing characters in a sense that implies how they're going to end up. And it doesn't say, Melville isn't saying, little did they know then, but Ishmael's approaching the Pequod and is getting this profound sense of like unease and destruction, and you know this is all going to come apart, and then they have it stalking onto the deck like Satan and things of this nature. So because the whole thing is being composed by someone who's experienced all of the events or is aware of all of the events, that they're necessarily going to be folding it in, and sometimes they're folding it in incredibly subtly. And then the reader has the writer has a purpose. Sorry, I'm kind of going back and forth over this. Has a purpose that is then informing the way that these events are being foretold. I feel like the modern resistance to that is coming off of the exposure to cinematic forms of storytelling and televised forms of storytelling, this desire to present a camera that is impassively recounting the events, one damn thing after another, that occur in the book, without any attention to how this text came to be in the reader's possession or who's leading us through the tale.
I wonder if it's sort of a modern TV equivalent of that is TV shows that start, you know, with this big action scene and so-and-so is in this room full of villains and somebody's about to get shot, and then you get 8 hours earlier.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I was just going to bring that up.
That's a prolepsis. That's not a little that we know in strict sense. That only really kind of applies to fiction, I think. But yeah, that's definitely a prolepsis.
It's a technique that in serial television has become, I think, the first episode of season 3 of Readercon, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had the scene that was going to be the penultimate scene of the season.
And the reason they do that in television is not because they are trying to construct a complex and artful narrative. What the dick is because they figure if you show them, when they show enough sex and violence in the first 5 minutes, they'll keep watching to find out what the hell we're all talking about. So,
Though it can be used artistically. Like,
yes.
I haven't seen too much of Breaking Bad, but in the first episode or two, they're doing a very good job of using specific keyframes or very artistically composed shots that destabilize you as you're entering into the story.
yes.
But I'm wondering also, vanishes. I don't know the technical term, but you know, a lot of what you read is written from the point of view of the narrator. You don't see them. They are not perceptible. It's rare that they will intervene. I mean, sometimes it can be jarring. Well, that's what I think. All of a sudden, why are you saying I? You know, it's the narrator supposed to be completely transparent. And in that case, it's harder to do prolepsis because the narrator will be intervening in same. So,
yes, now the actual narrators, speaking narrators can do prolepsis, just like Ishmael does, and Moby Dick. But I see what you mean. There has to be, what happens with this kind of device and many other kinds of rhetorical devices is that we are used to, in the modern age, from Hemingway on, of not knowing that there is a narrator. It's show and tell. The story rolls on in a form where events are revealed by a voice that isn't a voice, or by a person that's not a person. And that kind of voice can't use this kind of proleptic device. What happens in this kind of proleptic device is that the narrator was telling stories, the narrating voice is telling stories, until he turns to the reader and says something about what's going on. Little did he know that, and if you don't have a voice that's capable of doing that, you haven't constructed one in the old-fashioned way that it was commonly done in Dickens and so on, in Ishmael. You cannot, you have forbidden yourself that device. And that's what happens. A lot of things, a lot of what has been told to us, me so much, but younger people than me, in your classes and in your schoolwork and stuff like that. Show, don't tell. You can't use these devices. It's old-fashioned. It makes the story overly obvious or whatever, and therefore it's not good. You ought to just keep it flowing forward as a series of events entirely.
Oh, which is frustrating because it robs prose of one of the things that only prose can do, and cedes so much territory to the kind of reflexive televisual aesthetic. You get people, it's the same sort of drive that leads young writers, that led me for a really long time to be very concerned with where the furniture was in the room. And I think it's really exciting that we're starting to see some loosening of the ice in that way. I mean, Ada Palmer's book, Too Like the Lightning, which just came out, is very intentionally narrated and is using all of these techniques to jump forward and backward in time. I don't think that it requires a narrator voice to be using some of these techniques. Like I was talking earlier with a friend who suggested that Dune was a good example. Even though it's using a very spare narrative style, the encyclopedia entries which are taking place, which are written after the action story, are all providing you clues that, like, this kid you are meeting in this bedroom is really important and you should pay attention to it.
Well, I would like to bring up this whole idea of spoilers, which I phrase as a test, word like a test. And the fact is that it's impossible to spoil a good piece of fiction or film by telling you what happened. Because telling you what happened in it is not what happens in it. What happens in it is a huge congeries of effects and acting and movies, or prose in fiction. Vladimir Nabokov says at one point, you have to read every good book twice. The first one to discharge all the kind of low-level emotions of the plot, and then once you get done with that, then you can read the book again for what really value which certainly is the case if you actually find yourself reading the book twice. You know what's going to happen, and it should not actually concern you very much at all. But it does, it still does, because you're now thinking about it in a different way.
The difference for me comes in, I know, I had Harry Potter is like well out of spoiler range now, right? The guy had Dumbledore's death spoiled for me. I spent the week avoiding the internet because I wasn't able to get my copy of the book, and I made the dumb mistake of going on forums where I thought I was safe, and of course there it was. And it wasn't that it ruined my experience of reading the book, but it changed my experience.
Oh, yeah.
So I wasn't surprised by it when I found myself doing this, looking for the hints of leading up to it, which isn't necessarily bad, but I kind of wish I hadn't known that going in.
You you can wish you hadn't known it, but you also, you're absolutely right, that it changes your experience when you read the book. And actually, in my view, might very well enrich your experience of the book. Because you have seen things in the book that you could have just passed over as so much stuff. Now you say, no, it's not just stuff. That is leading me to conclude reality.
There is a phrase that I picked up, and it's not that it's new, but I only learned it about 3 years ago. I was doing an interview with Michael Bishop about I'm sure you'll remember the name of the novel, but I don't. It's a baseball novel.
Brutal innings.
Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful. And it was just being re-released. And there is a major, now I'm not going to use the word spoiler. The word that Michael used was, there's a major reveal about 75 pages, I don't know how many words, 75 pages into the book. And I will say this much, there is a narrator. It's told in the first person. We're given little clues. At one point, the narrator makes a reference to something that happened 150 years earlier. So he knows it's not your ordinary baseball scout. But then we discovered that the narrator is a major, major literary figure who everybody in this room knows. And the fact that it is this figure, that we learn the identity of the narrator, just gives you a very sweet thing. It doesn't spoil the bleeping book. But as we were talking on the radio to the great washed and unwashed public, and I'm interviewing him about this, I'm saying, well, the thing is that in 1870, and he said, yeah, there's a reveal in there that might take some, that we might be spoiling, no, excuse me, you never used the yes word, that we might be taking away a little bit of the pleasure of some of the readers from it. And I thought that was so well put. And so I don't believe that it could be a spoiler. I don't think that it would spoil the book, take away from the book. But I do think that a writer can plant little pleasures into something that as they unfold, you go, ah. And if you know it in advance, it's not going to ruin it. But you've taken away a little reveal that the writer has laid out for you and says, I want you to get a little thing on your spine. How do you do it?
Well, I just want to point out the fact is a very different kind of view of reviewing and spoiling what we're discussing. Which is spoil themselves, not that it's spoiled by other readers. That now, if you say, well, the writer has arranged all of this stuff very carefully, and he wants you to experience, she wants you to experience it in the way she wrote it, not the way you could tell her on the review. So, well, this is what happens. Really, he's the devil. Well, nobody knows that. Then you have taken on a role that you may not be actually earning.
But if you're told that in the very beginning of the play, that would be on top. So let's say that Bishop put that in the front, which by the way he did. When he first wrote the book.
And he plays it later on. Or did not tell it till the end.
No, it's not the end. It's about, I'd say a fifth of the way through the book.
That's great. By that time you're ready to guess.
Yes,
Oh, of course that's it.
he's been seeding you little things. He started out with, this is who I am. And that was it. And instead what he did was he gave you a few thousand words, dropping hints on you, and then said, ta-da, and then the book really began. So in a way, it spoiled itself with a long prose.
Or did not spoil.
Or did not, it just took its darn sweet time to read. But you're absolutely, so in what instances are books, it may be derided, but it's something that can be used
feature a decent chunk of the same characters, just at a younger sort of stage in their development. And this allowed me to do something that I have never been able to do before, which is set up a tragedy. Like a real honest-to-God tragedy, where you know that this is going, you know exactly how this is going to end up because you've read the previous book. You know where all of these characters are going to be from the perspective of history, who's alive, who's dead, and what happens. And then you get to deal with the damage that leads up to these characters being where they are in the future. And that has its own sort of suspense and its own pace of revelation. And it's not a story that I tend to get to tell all that often in a realm where I'm constantly breaking green field. Constantly trying to tell like a new story, in a new world, and a new this, and like that.
I know that not the novel in English I'm currently writing, but the one I'm planning to write next, which I've taken more and more copious notes on. I'm going to try something rather strange. We were talking about invisible narrator. What I want to do is something that alternates like transcriptions of documents and narrative passages and stuff like that. And I'm planning to have the scene like probably almost the very opening of the book, in which one character asks a terribly important question that reveals something of its very existence, but that you will not understand until you get to the end of the book. That wait a minute, that this means that. And so in a way it's, I don't know, anti-exposing itself, but so anyway, we'll see if I ever get around to finishing the damn thing, but that's the idea.
Done it yet? Now it's on the bucket list.
Next project! One of my favorite examples of this is sort of a little goofy, but is the anime Baccano, which, if any of you guys are familiar with, it's an amazing 13-episode cartoon series. And it starts off with a conversation between two characters who show up maybe 2 or 3 other times in the whole series about who the main character of the series is. And it's a conversation about history and about historiography and about imposing narratives on this series of incredibly chaotic events featuring 3 different timelines with occasionally overlapping sets of colorful characters. All of them have their own agendas. Some of them connect to what the plot of the show may be, and the purpose of this is not actually to spoil things or is not actually to reveal anything in particular beyond the fact that all of this crazy data that you're about to get hit with in the 2nd episode, that you're being hit with even in the 1st episode, is sort of relevant to itself. It provides a little bit of a frame within which you can expect that these gangsters in 1936 New York, these alchemists in the 17th century, on a ship in the 17th century, these folks on a train, and like, you know, these other random criminals who don't actually ever feature in the series ever again, but are visible for about 30 seconds in one shot once, are all part of the same story, and you are going to be following all of them. So like, the fact that this is a story can be a spoiler for a story, if that makes any sense.
My favorite example is the opening of the Volkov's Laughter in the Dark. He has this paragraph in the opening of Laughter in the Dark that says, once upon a time there was a man named, I can't remember his name, but once upon a time there was a man named, he loved, was not loved, and his life ended in ruins. Says there is enough room on any tombstone for the entire story of a man's life as much as it needs to be told, but detail is always welcome. And then the rest of the book follows. But you've already been told the guy's going to love somebody, it's going to end badly, he's going to lose his life and everything else and die in despair. Is that a spoiler? You know, I don't know. If you cut, of course, if you have never read King Lear, you're going to go to King Lear and say, I know, he gives his kingdom away, and it's really stupid, and he's got the one daughter that really loves him, but he sends her away, and then he runs around with the other sisters and ends in despair and dies, and so does the daughter. I know that. Is that a spoiler? No.
So actually, My first exposure to King Lear, I was maybe 8. And my dad, who wasn't a big Shakespeare buff, picked lambs off of the shelf for a bedtime story. And when people's eyes started being gouged out, I was very confused as to the sort of story we were reading, because Lear, in its raw setup, is very much a fairy tale. We have the king and the 3 daughters, and then we have the duke and the 2 sons, and then when it all goes pear-shaped, it's a huge surprise. If you don't know Lear.
Well, that's a good point. So there was no reveal. There are a couple of the land stories that really are, that is a big reveal about what is going to happen then. You find out pretty soon. But he was pretty cagey.
Well, okay, if we're going to go that route, let's talk Macbeth for a moment, shall we?
Ah, prophecy. How great. That's it. Those are great. Whenever you hear prophecy in a story, obviously it's going to come true.
Yeah.
Why would you need a prophecy that doesn't come true? And you don't know what way it's going to come true.
And I would say that tends to spoil fantasy books in the sense of spoiled milk.
Oh.
Usually it goes sour because, oh no, not another prophecy.
Good, you never own again, the Norns.
I know that I read a historical novel about Napoleon where this fortune teller tells Josephine a number of things. I'm like, yeah, cheap. So cheap. Of course the fortune teller knows everything, Why don't you believe her? It's the author talking to her.
That's a great example. They can go very badly wrong.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that prophecy can do, and even sometimes just the little did he know, is you set up the reader expectations for one thing, and maybe one of the reasons it's so derided, or can be derided, not necessarily so derided, but if it's deployed badly, like you said earlier, then that's like, oh, well, I saw how it's going to go from the start. But one of my favorite lines is in The Stand. And there's the Ralph Steele and Glenn, they're going to Vegas, and they fall down this ravine. Stu breaks his leg, the other 3 have to go on. And the line is, as they're leaving, is none of them ever saw Stu Redden again. And what it sets you up to think is not where the book goes. And it was one of those ones where I spent the next 2 chapters like devastated. And then I was devastated all over again for a different reason. But then he kind of turned what I was thinking was going to happen on its head.
Well, that's one of the great things about prophecy. This is the awful thing that happens to Macbeth at the end of Macbeth, which is, oh my God, it is true. But in not the way that I wanted, right? Yes, exactly.
I am probably going to receive hell for this, but I'm going to discuss a short story written by my partner, Barbara Krasnoff. I'll save for the moment because she's leading the panel in the next room. She wrote a story that was in Hopper Phoenix Live, and she'll be reading from it sometime during this time. And it's a really good story. It starts out at a point, little girl, little boy, the girl sees the boy, and at one point they're saying, well, what about you? And the little boy says, oh, well, I'm dead. Or at least that's what my daddy tells me and all this. And the story goes on and on. There's a lot of fun incidents and various things that go on. And at the end of the story, there is a major reveal. We are supposed to have forgotten, and we have forgotten, that the boy said that he was dead. What the big end of the story is, and boy was this spoiled, is that, not of course, but the girl is dead as well. And this is why she is able to see it. It's really a lovely story. She did it very well. So we are given that little bit of data at the very beginning, and then the skillful writer is able to cause the characters and us to forget it as all these other incidents take place, and then there's a payoff. I will say one thing. Barbara got the book was called out in Publishers Weekly, and they cited Barbara's story, and they said she was so glad to be in there. Only the review in PW said,
Barbara Krasnoff's story about two dead children. That is a spoiler.
Okay, then there really are spoilers.
Really are
Just
such things.
convinced me.
And that was one of them.
This sort of thing can be used really artfully, not just to set up the expectation, like we've been talking about, but also to distract from other expectations. So, so an aspect of the way the narration into like lightning works that I really enjoy is that we start off with this big pitch by the narrator. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the most important thing that's happened in history basically ever, and you're reading this because it's really important. If you're reading it at all, if there's a history left. And, okay, so here we are. And he sort of mentions in the gloss that, oh yeah, you know, you might doubt some of my stories because you know a little bit about me, but don't worry about it, it's fine. Trust me, just stick with me and you'll see that it's so important. And the effect of this is, for about 300 or 400 pages, you may forget that this is someone who's, not whose veracity you should be doubting, but who you should be really wondering, who is this person, what is their backstory, why are they so very carefully avoiding talking about anything that happens to them in the past, until that comes back to haunt you. And so it becomes another one of those attention-directed magic tricks.
Yes.
You can really satisfy somebody by saying, oh, I should be watching for what happens to the boat.
Right. I thought of another example of a very different kind. I was thinking about unreliable narrators. Unreliable narrators can tell stories which they reveal things apparently by accident that they would not. I mean, the best one is The Good Soldier, Maddox Ford, in which apparently the writer is a dope. I mean, the narrator is a dope. He's telling you the whole story of this awful romance that he got into, these terrible things that happen. He's always doing it. He's saying, oh, I shouldn't have told you. It kind of spoils the story for you to know that. But let me go back a few steps. It's acting as though he does not know how to tell his story. He's a bad writer, but of course, he's not. Maddox Ford is the writer. He knows exactly what he's doing. But another kind of instance we're listening to is Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle. The Cat's Cradle, everything is over at the beginning of the story. And you quickly understand that it's all over. And at the end, of course, he's going to throw the ice nine into the ocean and all life is going to die. But he's apparently seeming to be narrating this story from the rock on which he's sitting at the end of the story. And you gradually add on details that in each one suggests that the whole story is over as you're reading. And it's not going to end